Good evening from a cold UK, and I'm guessing a fairly nice lunchtime over in. Are you still in San Francisco? You originate from San Francisco.
Uh, yes,
hmm
very
Is it?
cold. Well, it's
Is
bright and
it?
sunny, but cool.
Okay.
Bright and sunny, but cool.
Okay. Okay. So it's autumnal-ish,
Yes.
autumnal-esque, fall-esque, because you don't
Yeah,
have
it's starting to cool
autumn,
off.
do you? Fall.
Yes. Now,
Yes, and
we
that's
don't have proper seasons here.
okay. Well, that's how we remember the when our clocks change because it's spring forward and then fall back
Precisely. Yeah.
the hour. So there we go. So a little Americanism in the UK.
There we go.
So I'm delighted to be chatting today. I won't say this evening today to thriller writer Damien Hunter. So we shall crack on and start at the beginning as we always do. So can you remember the first thing you wrote and how did you get into writing?
Yes. As a child, the first thing I wrote was a short story in the science fiction genre called Explosion on Saturn, because at that age, I lived and breathed science fiction. And it was about a freighter bound for Saturn, space freighter, and an alien being has invaded the vessel, and the crew is having quite a bit of difficulty first recognizing there's a threat and then dealing with it because it's gaseous, it's difficult to see, and it takes on visible form only when it wants to.
Okay.
So that was my start, and I don't recall how it ended. I wish I could say that I saved that story, but
Oh,
somehow in my many moves, I lost it over the years.
oh,
I
what a
followed up
shame.
a couple of years later with another science fiction story about an evil robot. There's always something bad happening. But eventually, I got more contemporary. In middle school, I was writing stories about World War II,
Mhm.
mostly unfinished manuscripts. And then by the time I was at the end of high school, I had moved over to the espionage genre exclusively because I had discovered James Bond. And I was just absolutely in love with Sean Connery, who to
Mm.
this day is the best
He's
James Bond of all. So that kind of
he's my
motivated me,
favorite.
but I was also reading quite a bit of books in the espionage genre. And most,
Mm.
not all, but most of the writers that I loved were all British. Most of the cream, Adam Hall, Eric Ambler, Lynn Dayton, although Dayton did sort of crime things and war as well.
Mm.
And just absolutely loved that genre and was fascinated. There's one American, Charles Macari, who I just recently found out his books were so realistic, and I always wondered why. But I just recently found out he was an ex CIA operative,
Aha.
so it made perfect
Helps.
sense. So yeah,
Yeah.
so
Write
that's
write
how I
what you
got
know.
started.
Mhm.
Pardon?
Write what you know.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yes. Or certainly write what you're interested in.
Yes,
Huh.
and I
So
don't. Obviously, I don't. I'm not in the espionage world myself, but I'm so
mm,
fascinated with it. I've done a lot of study
mm,
that I think, in my opinion, imagination and research will make up for what you haven't actually done yourself.
yeah. That's the thing. If you know, because writers have to be readers as well, and if you know, obviously you would check the facts or have a good editor who would check your facts. Because I say I edit for the 100th reader because 99 won't notice, but there'll always be someone who will.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure in your genre it's finding the balance because again there'll be readers who want to know every single detail, like
Yeah,
how fast a bullet, the trajectory of a bullet from a certain kind of weapon, they would want to know all that. Whereas most readers will probably, if it slows the pace or the plot down too much, it's finding the balance as a writer
that
to
is true.
getting
But as you
enough
say, there's always
detail.
that 100th person who's going to care a lot and be vocal.
Yeah.
Uh, Alfred Hitchcock had a phrase, when he talked about his filming of spy movies, the MacGuffin. What's the MacGuffin? The MacGuffin is the thing that the spies are running around about, but the audience don't care. Well, in
Mm.
books, there's a significant portion of the audience that does care, and you've got to address them. You
Mm.
have to satisfy that hunger or that curiosity or that desire to know.
Mm.
So I try to get fairly detailed, but again, there's a limit because I've been told that my writing is very visual. I like it that way, and that's deliberate because I try to impart. You're unzipping a curtain, and when you read one of my books, you step into a world. That's my objective.
Mm.
So I try to make it visual, but I try not to go overboard with the description.
Without giving the name away, do you have any idea of who might play your characters? Do you have them in mind when you write, or?
Yes, I do very definitely
Mm,
because I'm a huge, in addition to reading in the genre a lot, I'm a huge movie fan. I'm a big fan of classic Hollywood, the studio system. Having said that, I a friend of mine introduced me to a Hollywood producer, and frankly, when I was sitting at dinner with this Hollywood producer,
mm,
I found that I was suddenly ambivalent about getting my book translated into a movie. And the reason is they might, to use a British expression, they might bollocks it up. They may very well ruin it. And I've
mm,
seen, there's very few movies, I think, that are truly as good as or better than the book.
mm,
And there's a
mm,
famous story of the American author Clive Cussler, who got one film made, and he's written maybe 30 books.
mm.
And if you're like the genre, and he was really disappointed and
Right.
sort of said never again. So I'm
Because he's
ambivalent about. I do picture those things because everybody wants to. Their dream is to have their book on the silver screen,
yeah,
and yet
yeah.
when I was presented with the opportunity, I was like, maybe not. This
Mm,
might be such a good idea.
yeah. Clive Cussler's naval, isn't he? Is he
Yeah, I think
sea
he is.
based, I
He's
think.
definitely written
Yeah.
things pertaining to the both the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy.
Okay. Yeah. So I see from your biography that you're still in full-time employment. Do you when do you write? Are you pretty good at saying, right, I've only got an hour today and write that?
Uh, it's not as disciplined a process or as scheduled a process as you
Mm,
would think. Uh, I write when I can,
mhm,
uh, mainly in the evenings, more often than not during vacation periods and on weekends.
mm,
After I have a government job, so after working, and it's very demanding, it takes a lot of mental energy to perform at the level that I perform at. And by the end of the day, you're done. You want to sit in front of
I
the
just
telly, you want
relax.
to eat, and you want to just fall asleep after that. So it
Yeah.
tends to be during my truly free time, which is weekends, evenings. Evenings if I'm really motivated and have a little bit of energy at the end of the day.
Mm, mm,
Uh, but also, I can't do it unless the phrase I use is the muse talking to me.
mm.
I can have all the free time in the world, and if the muse is not talking to me, I will have the equivalent of writer's block. And I've heard from some of your previous interviewees the discussion about whether well, writer's block doesn't really exist.
Mm.
For me, it does.
Yeah. I think
But
everybody must get to a point in any project
yeah,
where nobody, I wouldn't say nobody, that's probably not true, but I'm sure pretty much every writer in their process of from when they started to now, regardless of how many books they've written, that I'm going to double negative now, that they've never come to a point where they haven't got stuck on something. They don't
right,
know what's going to happen next.
right.
And so,
And there are times where the well just has run dry, and for
mm,
me, I have to often wait it out or try to get some kind of stimulus that will motivate me to write. And that stimulus could be a piece of music, a radio broadcast. And the radio broadcast, you think it might be music. There's a radio station in Berkeley, California called KPFA, and they're a bit left of center. And there was a broadcast about the protest on Kent State during the Vietnam War,
mm,
and the very famous photo of the girl putting the flower in the gun of the National Guardsman. And this was before they had opened fire on some students, but it's a message of peace. She's putting a single daisy in the barrel of this National Guardsman's rifle,
mm,
and that broadcast, for me, helped me at a point when I was stuck on something in my book, The Majinega Missiles, toward the end of the book.
Mm.
And I was so inspired by that that I used that. One of the characters referred to that photograph,
Right.
and the chapter in which that happens is called "The Flower and the Gun."
Very
So
nice.
there are things, it can be a piece of music, a
Mm.
film,
Mm.
a book, a news article, but there are different kinds of stimulus that can help break that writer's block, and I can get back in touch
Mm.
with the muse, and I can go on and
Yeah.
complete the project, or at least complete the part of it that I'm working
Yeah. So do you work on one thing at a time? You don't have, if you get stuck on one, you don't, there's nothing else you you go to
on. Well,
continue that one, or
it changes over time, because there was a time when, if I was stuck on something, I could skip ahead and I would simply write. And I've heard other of your guests talk about this. I would go and write another scene that I had very clearly envisioned, and I was able to do it. I would, let me just change the channel. I'll write this scene, I'll put that aside, and then I'll connect them up later. I'll weave them
Mhm.
together.
Yeah.
Lately, in the last couple of years, I haven't been able to do that. It's very linear. I have to go through. No, I can't do that. I've got to get to this point. So
Yeah.
my creative ability is changing, perhaps not for the better, because frankly it was always nice, and you could maintain a sense of progress when you're
Mm.
able to switch between scenes and get another part of the story done,
Mm.
so you have that sense of progress and momentum.
Mm.
Now it's more like I'm the conductor on a train, and if I can't get that train to move at that moment, I'm stuck.
Right. Yeah, if I get to a point where I don't know what's going to happen at that point, but then I know something later, then I just write more here and then go on to the later scenes. And if I get to the end and I know there are holes in it, I just search for more here and then find out where I've got to then connect the points up. But I
Yeah,
work
that is
on
a
more than one thing at once, so it helps. I could just switch to something else and come
Yeah,
back
I like
again.
that. It's a very liberating thing to be able to do, because
Mm,
again, I feel like, oh, even though I'm having difficulty here, I'm continuing to make progress, getting
mm,
closer to the end.
mm. But it's different. Was different something for different strokes. You know, what works for one person and what works for one person in one book doesn't necessarily work for the same person in a different book.
Oh,
And it
absolutely.
sounds like your process has changed slightly. The more you write, you're finding
Yes.
a better way of working for you.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
I am able to finish projects now. I have
Okay.
Lord knows how many unfinished manuscripts
Yeah, me too.
sitting in a box. But now, when I
Mm.
start something, I at least have a better track record of getting it done.
Yeah. Are you given deadlines because you're with a publisher? Do they say what they
My
want
current
next?
publisher, that's a good question. My current publisher does not give deadlines,
Mm.
and doesn't seem to impose deadlines on themselves, which is a problem.
Okay.
So I'm not at that stage yet that I have hard deadlines.
Mm.
They they're effective. What I try to do, though, is set my own deadlines. And in I had deadlines for the Majinega missiles, self-imposed. And if I missed a deadline, I would immediately set a new one. I didn't let myself off the hook. I didn't
Yeah.
relax. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, you can't get this done by October 1st. You
Yeah.
will finish it by December 1st, come hell or high water.
Yeah.
And I got it done. But you have to be disciplined about at least recognizing that you need that sense of pressure, that
Yeah.
sense of you're working toward a specific objective, because it will help you stay motivated.
Yeah. So when you finished your book and it goes off to the publisher, do you have anybody in between who reads it? Do you have a beta reader, an alpha reader who reads it before you send it off to the publisher?
Yes, I have a woman who does copy editing.
Mm.
I worked with two publishers in the course of the Majinega missiles, and the first one, they had an editing process, and that involved a live body. But they also had an editing process, unbeknownst to me, which is why I changed. One of the reasons I changed publishers. They also
Mm.
had basically where they just ran it through the equivalent of a chat GPT program,
Right.
and they would
Yeah.
automatically spit out these nonsensical things like, well, you can't use the word petrol. Well, why not? Because that's a
Because it's
European phrase.
right. Mm.
They wouldn't say that in Central America. And I would respond, I don't care. I have
Mm.
decided to use this word. I'm
Yeah.
in charge and I'm
Yeah.
going to do it. But there were other things that have changed over the years, and there's been a dumbing down of the American language as
And here.
the American educational system and the American culture, in my opinion. But
Right.
there's specific manifestations of it. For example, when I was a kid in English, rear view mirror was 3 words.
Mm.
Now, all of a sudden, the new Webster's Merriam Dictionary has decided rear view is a single
Just
word.
hyphenated.
And my response
Yeah.
to that is that's absurd. It's 2 words because, and I told them, I wrote this long email to them about the Webster's Dictionary of, say, circa 1950 versus the Merriam-Webster Dictionary of 2015. And I said, I reject the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. That is bad English. It's improper. If I had marked that on my paper in school when I was a
Mm.
child, it would have come back with red all over the page. So
Yeah.
no,
Mm.
I was very firm about that because
Mm.
I honestly believe that the English language, the American version of the English language, is
Mm.
moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Oh, the
So,
same here. I think I feel sorry for anybody whose English isn't their first language, and they're learning from adverts on the television. Because the
yeah.
amount of
Oh,
adverts that say, "Oh, he went fast,"
oh yeah.
and it just and
It's
there's
terrible.
a book I'm going through at the moment where it's got quick instead of quickly. And I say, well, yes, it's acceptable, but some grammarians will reading it won't like it.
Mm-hmm.
But then as an editor, I leave the choice up to the author because the book is your book. So I'm
Yes.
sure with your editors, whether you hire them directly or whether they're the publisher's editor, ultimately it's your book. It
But I
has your
didn't,
name on
I
it.
yeah, and I digressed there with my
Yeah,
little
that's okay.
thing
No,
about. But
yeah.
the editors that I worked with when it was a human being,
Mm.
they were quite good. It was very helpful. I didn't agree with everything they said, but I did wind up incorporating about 80% of their suggestions.
Mm.
It was
That
very
sounds
helpful
about right. Yeah.
because my story is set in a specific point in time. It's 1983, and I
Mm.
have things in there like uh, my agent is on assignment he's posing as a journalist, freelance journalist, and he's got a laptop with him. Well, there weren't very many laptops available in 1983. The people who had them were probably government types and folks in the military
Mm.
because they weren't available to the general public yet. They always, the newest technology, the best technology goes to the people in high up in government and the spies
And they
and
were
the
like
military.
bricks,
Right.
weren't they? Opening
Initially,
brick.
they were. The thing would weigh 10 pounds,
Yeah.
but they had them, and so they pointed out to me that look, we didn't really have these available. So I
Mm.
made it very clear that this was an experimental model of this new product called a laptop.
Mm.
And when he goes through customs, he's got a camera and various other things, tools of the trade for a journalist.
Mm.
But the customs guards have never seen a laptop, and they're very insistent that he demonstrate to them what this thing does. He's got to turn it on and show them, yes, it's just
Sure.
basically it's an electronic typewriter. That's all it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And only then do they lose interest. So I tried to add little details like that because of the input that I got from my editor. So it was
Yeah.
helpful.
That's nice. I like that. I imagine the black screen with the flashing cursor top left, and you do and
Exactly.
it comes out in green. I can't remember whether it's
Right.
green or white.
It was green. It
Or
was
the
the
was it
little
green?
flashing green
Okay.
lights.
Yeah, yeah. So you're pretty good at receiving critique from people.
Yes, I will. If I think it's valid, I will incorporate it.
Mm.
Other things though, if they hit me wrong, I will reject them out of hand. They wanted to silly, nonsensical things like there's reference. It's basically um, a war story. This is an undercover American agent who is sent posing as a journalist to infiltrate a guerrilla movement in a Central American country that's basically in the middle of a raging insurgency, a guerrilla war. And there's various references to military things like jeeps, and they insisted that I capitalized jeep. And I'm sure
Okay.
this was a chat GPT thing. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
absurd
Yeah.
because
They won't
Jeep is,
necessarily
yes, it's
be
a commercial
made by.
brand.
Yeah,
It's a commercial
exactly.
brand
Yeah.
now, but the
Yeah.
Jeeps I'm referring to are U.S. Army surplus Jeeps that this country bought from the American military
Mm.
uh, prior to the time that Jeep became a household name, capital J. There was
Yeah.
a time when it was just used by people in the military.
Mm,
That's why it's going to be lowercase j. It was just
mm,
sort of nonsensical things like that. And so they
yeah.
finally quit fighting with me and surrendered and said, well, we won't further edit the book. And I should have demanded a refund because I was paying an editing fee. But I
Mm,
said, fine. From this point on, you've been very
mm,
helpful. I will edit it myself. And I
mm,
did. And it was grueling, but I had a good idea of I didn't with my first novel. This is my second. I
mm,
had a very good idea what I needed to do, and I went through it with a fine tooth comb,
mm,
literally reading it line by line 10 times. And I caught a lot of things, and I have learned to be my own editor, which
mm.
I don't recommend for folks unless they're relatively experienced. And I also don't recommend it because it's a long, drudgery type
I hate
painful
doing my
process.
own. I love
It's
doing it for
not,
anybody else. Hate
yeah,
doing my own.
it's not fun.
No,
It's just not.
no.
But
Well, I tend to, sorry. Yeah.
better product at the end. That's all.
Yeah. The thing is, you can go over it 100 times. As an editor, as a freelance editor, I go through a book, well, twice, and then it goes back to the author. Then I go through it again twice, and then it goes to the author, and then I go through it again twice if it
Mm-hmm.
needs it once. Certainly, as sort of more as a proofread. So there's a lot of back and forth, and you still pick up things the final time that leap out. And I listen to it on a Kindle, so I hear it
Mm-hmm.
as it's written rather than
Mm-hmm.
how you imagine it to be on the screen when it is actually not quite
And the longer
written
your
out.
book, the more opportunities there are for things that you're going to miss.
Yeah.
The frustrating thing is getting the book back from the publisher, and then you find things that you just did for all the effort that you put into it. You may
Yep.
find a random, apostrophe where there shouldn't be one or something like that.
Yeah.
You go
Yeah.
nuts as the
Yeah.
author, but that's part of the process. I mean, I've seen very professional New York Times bestsellers with typos in them, and
Yeah, absolutely.
you can't get away from it completely.
No. And you can have as many eyes. You can have an alpha reader, beta readers, um, editor, and proofreader, and then it goes off to the ARC team, advanced reader
Mm-hmm.
copy, and then they pick up things that half a dozen eyes have been through. So,
Yeah,
having been published with a publisher, do you get a say? Do you get a choice of covers? Do you get a say on what your cover's going to be like?
just on that. And with my current publisher, we've had a bit of a tug of war, quite
Okay.
frankly, about the cover of the Majinega missiles because
Mm,
the publisher has one vision and I have another one. And I'm like,
mm,
I'm maintaining the position that I'm the author. This is
mhm.
my book. I am the one that's got to be pleased and happy with the cover, not
Yeah.
you.
Mm,
And that it's sort of the immovable object meets the irresistible force. So we clashed on that numerous times. I finally
mm,
won out. And
okay.
even then, I wasn't completely happy with the cover.
Yeah.
So, it's better if the publisher has a truly crack team of artists of whatever type, then fine. They're
Mm,
more likely it's easier to kind of surrender the reins and let them take it. And
mm,
I've had good experiences and bad experiences with that.
mm,
But when they don't have a lot of in-house resources for the cover, you feel that much more wedded to your position of I want certain elements in the visual elements of the
mm,
cover, and we've got to do it my way.
mm. Because
You can kind of back off if they have more in-house expertise and
mm,
talent.
there's a fine line, really, I think, when it comes to covers, because 50% of it is you know your book better than they do,
Yeah.
and the other 50% is they know what kind of cover sells for which genre.
Yes.
So
And that's
you
where the
have to,
conflict.
yeah. So you have to kind of trust that they know what they're doing. But
Mm-hmm.
equally, because I know of high level authors who have said on Facebook that they had no choice with their cover. Their top publisher, they had no choice with the cover, but the cover's got a dog on it, and there's no dog in the novel. That kind, that kind of
Yeah,
silly thing. Or
exactly.
she's blonde, but in the book she's a brunette. Um,
Ah,
and so it's reader expectation. If there's a dog on the cover, the reader will expect, especially if they're a dog lover, then they'd
oh
notice
yeah,
things like that.
yeah. And the other thing I think to watch out for is AI, artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
and because some uh places just ban the use of it. They won't allow you to sell it if
Mm,
it's an AI generated cover. And frankly, I have issues with AI, uh, good and bad. Mostly, I don't want to use it. There are things that it doesn't do well.
mm,
They have a lot of trouble with hands and feet. And
okay.
if you look closely, unless it's extremely well done, you can tell by the eyes. The eyes do not look quite symmetrical. They may not be aligned properly. There's some
Mm,
given, and then the other thing is sometimes it just looks too perfect. So it's not a hair out of place, not a scratch, not a blemish. People don't
mm.
look like that.
No,
So
especially not
unless
not Sean
their
Connery's
photo,
James Bond. Yeah.
yeah, unless their photo has been heavily airbrushed.
Yeah. Well, when you
Yeah.
upload a book to Amazon, it asks whether it's you've had an AI input into it. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
knows at this point, not that I've heard anyway. No one knows
Right.
at this point that if you tick the box, what happens. But there are court cases going on with UI AI usage of things.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but in this process, I use an AI because there's no choice to do the subtitles and then the lesson summary,
Yeah.
and it's
Well, things like
brilliant.
that.
It's
That's totally
brilliant.
valid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
but I every now and then I have an electronic friend which I've switched off an
Mhm.
Alexa. So I've
Yeah.
switched her off so she won't disturb us. And every now and then you ask something and she says, oh, I'm something really quite basic, and she says, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Or you ask a question, because often it's how you ask something, how
Yes.
you phrase it,
Right. Word
and
choice.
so quite about once a week, either one of us will say that you're not going to take over the world because the answers we get.
I love
Um,
it. Exactly.
yeah, yeah. So we're going to come on to our favourite topic next of marketing. Seeing as you have a publisher, because obviously self-published, it's all down to you. Um, how much of the marketing are you expected to do, being traditionally published?
Well, with this publisher, it's more of a 50-50. There are some things that they will go out and find and set up for
Hmm.
me. And then there's other things like this interview where they say, look, there's this new podcast. If you're interested, contact the podcaster and
Yeah,
check it out and you go for it.
yeah.
And so so I'm doing things like that. So some of it is definitely requiring me to set aside time
Mm,
periodically to take the initiative and work it myself.
mm,
Which, as the writer, I'm a prima donna. I hate having to do that, but I like very much the opportunity to interact and talk with folks like you.
mm.
So I'm learning to just sort of get over that and set that
Okay.
aside. It's like you're not publishing with Random House, so you're going to have to apply a little
Mm,
elbow grease here. You're going to have
mm.
to put in some effort. So I finally got that through my head, and so it's maybe it's 50-50, 60-40, somewhere in there.
Okay,
I'm
that's
having
pretty
to put
good
in,
actually. That's pretty good
yeah,
for a publisher.
yeah. So
Mm,
they're very good about pulling me into opportunities. Some of them I don't always want to take advantage of. There was
mm.
one suggestion that I try to sell books at a Comic Con, a comic
Okay,
book convention,
okay.
and I would have considered it, but for the fact that one, I didn't have very much notice, and two, at the moment I have an AI generated cover, and they made explicitly clear no AI allowed
Really
at this
interesting.
event because I'm sure that's
Right.
pushback on the part of the artists that
Yeah.
are represented and contracted to produce things for Comic Con, and they don't
Yeah.
want to undercut that, which I totally can understand. And I
Because they're so
have,
graphic heavy, Comic Cons.
yeah, and I
Get
have
that totally.
I'm working on a new cover that is actually going to be a photograph or an artist version of that photograph with some other
Mm,
elements that I want to put in it. So I'm working to try to get around that in the future. So I've had at this point 3 different covers, and I'm working on cover number 4,
okay.
all with this uh, the next version is going to be photos of a model that I went out and contracted with to take pictures, and she's the cover girl basically because the one of the main characters in the book is a female guerrilla leader, and so I was in a restaurant uh, in Oakland uh, one spring morning with a friend of mine, and she walks in And when you write a character, you definitely have a clear sense in your mind what that character looks like. And this woman, this young woman walked in, she's maybe, I don't know, somewhere between 25 and 30 years old, beautiful. And I literally, I said, "That's Sarita," which is the name of the character. I said it out loud. I was so excited. And my friend said, "Calm down. We're in public. Behave yourself." I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
"No, no, that's her. I'm going to go talk to that girl." And immediately said, "Don't do it. Her boyfriend's there. He's going to
Yeah,
punch you out."
yeah.
I said, "Look, I'm going to go talk to her."
Yeah.
So
I
I,
think you look like you can hold your own, as the
yeah, and
saying goes. Yeah.
yes, and it was, but I introduced myself. She was with her mother and her boyfriend. I introduced myself to the boyfriend first,
Good
and
idea.
then the mother, and then her.
Right.
And we struck up a conversation, and I convinced her that I was not a lunatic, and gave her my business card, and we emailed back and forth, and I offered her literally a contract that we wrote up together. We agreed on a sum, and I said, let's do a contract because it'll protect the both of us. And we
Mm,
did the photography at the botanical gardens in San Francisco.
nice.
Yeah, and there's a
Okay.
section of those gardens that mimics they call it the Mesoamerica portion, where they mimic the vegetation you can find in Central America. So it was perfect.
Wow. So how many covers do you think she'll be on? What's
I'm
your
hoping no. I'm hoping this is the last one. Frankly,
okay?
it's been very difficult because the photo's not ideal. I did it myself. I'm not a professional photographer,
Mm,
and there are lighting elements, and there's other things I want to try to incorporate, which I may or may not be able to do. What I'm hoping is that I can get an artist to copy her image with a certain amount of realism, faithful
yeah.
reproduction, and then
Yeah.
incorporate other things that I want
Yeah.
into the image. That's purely his own or her own artwork, and
Yeah.
that will be the final cover.
Yeah.
I'm getting. I want her to be the centerpiece.
Are you
But
working on a? Oh, one more. Okay.
one more version, and then I'm done
Right.
because this I've gone
Right.
through several iterations, and it's
Yeah.
been frustrating trying to get what you feel is the perfect cover.
Sure. So what are you working? Which do you have a manuscript on the go at the moment? Do you
Yes,
have
it is
more
a
planned?
sequel involving the same character. The character's name is Leighton.
Okay.
He is an African American agent that is doesn't work for the CIA. There's another smaller agency I've created,
Mm.
and he's often used as an assassin, but he does other things. And this is a plot line where a rogue uh, cartel leader in Central America has um, murdered the attorney general in his own country, along with the head of the DEA. So there are aspects of this that mimic the film Clear and Present Danger. What's different about it
Okay.
is uh, my agent is sent to systematically take down this guy's operation. And they do it initially with a series of assassinations, but then they also start to interdict um, the actual shipments of cocaine into the country. And that is involves completely illegal paramilitary operations. But they've got the backing of the White House. There's nothing in writing, of course.
Hmm.
And what the agents themselves have to go through, because he's working with a team of two other people, and what they have to go through, realizing there's a little bit of a dichotomy here, because the only reason, and they understand, the only reason they're doing this is because this particular drug dealer, is this particular drug lord, happened to go too far. But if you had just toned it down a little bit and kept the volume down and not embarrassed the United States, we probably would be letting him do business as usual. Isn't that right? And so they're going through that sort of thing. So there's this
Mm.
undercurrent and subplot about American foreign policy, and is there an element of hypocrisy here? What's
Mm.
going on? And by the way, at some point, are we gonna be disavowed if we slip up, if we're captured, whatever?
Sure.
We know we're not getting any help. So
Yeah.
there's that sort of cynical realization that if
Mm.
anything goes wrong, we're on our own. So why are
Mm.
we doing this again? So it's that sort of thing.
Yeah. And do you random question, when you're writing, do you ever, because I occasionally if I'm trying to work out how to write something, how to explain something, I'll be there. My previous dog would sort of look at me and go, she's at it again. Do you, as a former still James Bond stroke Mission Impossible lover, when you're writing, do you ever pretend you've got a gun and you're like this and around the room and acting out
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
the actions that your characters
Absolutely.
are doing, pretending
Absolutely.
that you are them?
There's not this book, but there was a scene in Secrets of State, which was the first book with this character, Leighton, and he's involved in a really horrible, messy, bloody gun battle. It takes place in a restaurant. And there's a scene where he runs out of bullets. And what happens if you've got a certain type of weapon, when you run out of bullets, if it's a semi-automatic pistol, the slide will lock open, and it looks very kind of strange. And so, I borrowed a friend's pistol, and he let me. So I was literally going around the house, clicking and unclicking the slide on this gun, and
Yeah,
what does it look
yeah,
like when it locks open, and if I
yeah,
fall this way and I drop it,
yeah,
what's it going to look like? So I definitely do that.
yeah.
It
There's a
may seem silly, but it helps you visualize
yeah,
and I think write more realistic.
yeah. The thing is, sometimes I'll pick up and mention about the five senses in a book. So by dialogue we have sound, by the action we have vision, effectively,
Mm-hmm.
and but you don't know when you're watching a movie how something feels. So the fact that you borrowed the gun and you could feel the weight of it,
Mm-hmm.
I think adds a dimension to it. Even if you don't include it, it's your knowledge, isn't it?
Definitely. And there are
Yeah.
little things like what are the indicators that the society is in poverty? And I took there's a scene toward the end of the Majinega missiles where for most of the time he's running through the countryside. He spends some time in the capital, which is relatively pristine, although it's got some issues. But most of the book he's in the countryside, so he's out in the bush, and he doesn't see the poverty in some of the other cities because obviously the capital is like Washington D.C. The part that the public and the dignitaries go to, we try to keep that as
Yeah.
pristine as possible in this country.
Yeah.
Like the Washington D.C. metro is uh, the cleanest metro I've ever seen, and it's absurd how clean it is. It doesn't
Mm.
look that way in other cities. So I borrowed that because I've done some traveling, not in Central America, but in the Caribbean. And okay, what does it look like? You've got boarded up businesses. That's a given. But you've also
Mm.
got things like, a dog in the middle of the street, in the middle of the day, who's too sick to move and doesn't
Mm.
belong to anyone. And eventually he's going to be run over and killed. You
Mm.
have an old
Which
man
you
who's
can't do in a book. You can't kill off dogs in a book.
no, and
No.
but I did depict the dog because I'm a dog lover myself.
Yeah.
I would expect my book sales to plummet if a dog ever died in my
Yeah.
book. But I did depict the dog just laying there and how it
Mm.
impacted the character and things
Mm.
like you know who are the guys who are employed in a certain part of town. The only guys who are employed are the guys who have motorbikes, and what do? Their careers for the drug dealers. Those are the people with jobs because the
Yeah.
economy is that bad. There's no
Yeah.
businesses unless you're a farmer or you work in a hotel. Forget it. You don't
Mm.
have a job.
Mm.
Uh, things like that. And then one scene that particularly struck me was the middle of the night. There was an old man, and he's sitting in a wheelchair on the divide, the concrete island between a 6-lane boulevard, 3 lanes going one direction, 3 lanes going the other, and he's sitting,
Mm.
and it's 4 or 5 in the morning. I was on the way to the airport, flying out of the country, and this happened to be the Dominican Republic, and he's in rags, he's filthy, and
Mm.
he's just sitting there staring, and it really struck me how if you're in a third world country and you're poor, you're really poor. The
Mm.
poverty in Western countries is a different and frankly higher standard. I'm not saying that the
Mm.
poor in the UK or the United States are not suffering, not at all, but
Mm.
it's a different thing in third world countries.
Mm. Wow. We can't end on that note. We're going to find something cheery.
That's a little too
Oh,
bleak.
I know that there was something else I was going to ask you. So do you still just read thrillers, espionage books? Do you? I'm sort of not semi-hopeful, but hopeful to a point that you may bring back some sci-fi, go back to your childhood, and that you might
I
rewrite
I
the
I
stories
will
from then.
occasionally I will occasionally buy sci-fi. I haven't actually read. I have books that I bought 2, 3 years ago. I haven't read yet, so my interest in it hasn't completely died. But in terms of
Mm.
what I actually spend time on, it's the espionage genre, detective stories, political biographies. I still like a good crime thriller. One of my favorite crime thrillers authors is P.D. James.
Nice.
Uh, so it's kind of a little bit eclectic. Still heavily based on, I work in government, so the political
Yeah.
piece has always interested me. So political
Mm.
biographies
Mm.
are of interest to me. I'm now reading a book on a biography of Howard Hughes,
Oh yes.
uh, along with an espionage tale by Helen McInnes called The Venetian Affair.
Okay.
And it's interesting that the changes in writing and what's considered marketable. The Venetian Affair was published in 1962. I just happen to be able to rattle it off because I'm reading it now, and
Mm.
it's so long and detailed. Some of these descriptions and the internal monologue the characters are having, that would not be, in my opinion, marketable today because it
No.
goes on for way too long.
Yeah.
And now everything's got to be, with books now have to compete with so many other forms of entertainment that
Yeah.
there's a pressure to keep it going, keep it moving. Don't
Yeah.
don't go down a rabbit hole with the
Mm.
descriptions. Don't go down a
Yeah.
rabbit hole with the internal monologue.
Mm.
Um, Other folks have talked about on your podcast. You can keep the story moving through a narration, or you can keep it moving through dialogue, or you can keep it moving through action.
Mm.
And most people try to err heavily on the side of action and dialogue as
Yeah.
opposed to narration.
Mm. Because it's all
I
about the
am a
characters.
Yes, I'm a little heavier on the narration probably than some would like,
Mm.
but I am also focused more on character development because I think that makes for a richer story.
Mm.
You get a better sense of who these people are and why they behave the way they do
Mm.
if you learn a little bit more about them. So I definitely do that.
Plus, also, it's your genre. Espionage, people want detail. If it's a
Yeah, and I think
romance,
it's
if it's,
more interesting
yeah.
if you get a little bit of background on,
Mm.
why things are happening. Why is this going on? What are the political machinations? What's the relationship between the dictator of the country and the head of the secret police?
Yeah.
Very suspicious and mistrustful, versus the guy who's the head of the army who sees
Mm.
the head of the secret police as a threat
Yeah.
because he doesn't want his force getting militarized or too large. There's all these little things swirling around, and I try
Mm.
to weave them into the story without going down a rabbit hole. But I think with espionage thrillers that have a political vein in them, like mine do, it's helpful to do that because, again, I think readers enjoy it to a degree.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much, Damien.
Thank you
And
for
look
hosting me.
forward to, you're very welcome. Look forward to you returning, hopefully in the next few weeks, and we'll dig deeply, proper grammar, dig deeply into your first book in the first session. So thank you so much for joining me.
I'd love to do it. Thank you.
Okay. Yes,
It's
thank
been a
you.
pleasure.
Okay. Bye bye.